The Clock of Retrograde. He liked to take a stroll by the cemetery in the evening, waiting alone for the sun to rise slowly from the west. The cemetery was a magical and sacred place where people were reborn, embarking on the painful journey of their life and beginning their journey of returning to simplicity and forgetfulness. Every day, the loved ones of the resurrected would come here dressed in black, forming a circle around the grave, holding back their tears as they awaited the gravedigger to unearth the tomb. It was a devout and sorrowful ritual. As the coffin rose slowly, the gravedigger would fill the grave again, using a chisel to erase the resurrection date on the tombstone. Soon after, everything here would be removed, covered with lush green grass, leaving no evidence that someone had slept here for countless centuries. The experience of resurrection varied for each person. Some would be sent home, waking up peacefully in their bed, returning to their twilight years. Others would be taken back to the hospital, tubes inserted all over their body, awaiting the revival of their heartbeat and breath, enduring the pain of diseases or serious injuries once again. Some would be thrown into the river or scattered on the streets, allowing the reverse flow of the river or the oncoming vehicles to repair their corrupt and damaged bodies, regaining their young and vibrant lives. But regardless of the complex and tedious process of resurrection, all paths led to the same destination. Everyone was destined to return to the mother's womb, regressing into a fertilized egg, ultimately becoming non-existent in this world. It was an illogical world where things always had results first, then traced back to various reasons. As the cigarette ashes on the ground rose slowly, the swirling smoke gathered at his fingertips, steadily increasing the length of the cigarette. Finally, he took out a lighter, extinguished the spark, and put the intact cigarette back into the box. One pack of cigarettes was finally restored, and soon he would be able to exchange it for some change at the convenience store on his way here. The reason he did these things was actually unrelated to his own thoughts. In fact, as he sat on the bench beside the cemetery, these thoughts in his mind were evaporating bit by bit. The operational rules of all things in this world were based solely on history and memory, unquestioned and unbreakable, and he was no exception. He had a good memory, allowing him to foresee most of the things that would happen in the future. For example, he would end his marriage at 26, leave his job at 23, return to university for advanced forgetting courses at 22, revisit his first love at 19, go back to high school at 18, and return to elementary school for basic knowledge forgetting at 12. However, in this world, the higher the memory and intelligence, the greater the price one had to pay because they stored vast wisdom and memories in their minds from the first day of rebirth. Everyone had to forget and endure more when returning to the womb, thus experiencing and bearing more. Leaves at his feet floated up with the wind, returning to the trees. Birds collected their droppings, placing small berries on the branches. Autumn was a season full of vitality, where all withering things in the world were slowly reviving. Yet, these fragile and beautiful things, with the arrival of spring, would soon become as if they had never existed. He was an editor at a newspaper, and his main daily task, along with his colleagues, was to eliminate all prophecies about tomorrow. Every morning, the newspaper would be collected from various corners of the city and uniformly destroyed. The newspapers documented something called news, containing all the significant events that were supposed to happen the next day, although invariably, the logic and truth of these events would be reversed. Amidst the roar of machines, newspapers turned back into sheets of blank paper. He would then disorderly and crudely alter the remaining prophecy drafts and hand them over to reporters. Reporters would then go to the locations where events were about to unfold, using pens or computers to erase all textual records of the events. So, the next day, everything unfolded in reverse without exception, then instantly disappeared from people's memories, becoming as if it had never happened. This was the spectacle of this world. People busied themselves to forget, sacrificed to restore everything to disorder and chaos. Skyscrapers were dismantled by workers, bricks turned into soil in factories, steel bars became ore, buried back where they belonged. Everyday items were picked up by people from garbage heaps, placed at home, waiting to be sold to stores after becoming brand new, ultimately returning to factories to be disassembled and reintegrated into nature as part of trees, mountains, and rivers. Everyone played an insignificant role in this process, without awareness, merely following their memories, then forgetting what they had done. In this world, money was an absurd existence. The wealth a person would have throughout their life was determined from the moment of their rebirth. The affluent were destined to exhaust their entire life's efforts to squander their wealth since, at the moment they returned to the womb, all their money had to be spent, otherwise, their parents would have to continue bearing this burden. Work was the primary way people consumed money, and the more diligent and capable a person was, the more efficiently they squandered money. Of course, there were exceptions, with some lucky individuals emptying all their money overnight through lotteries. However, as an individual who wasn't so fortunate, he, being a small editor, was destined for hardship. He repeated the same tasks day after day, merely to deplete the money he had accumulated in his account every month due to acquiring a house. Days passed uneventfully, his work went from being proficient to unfamiliar, his demeanor changed from stable to rough, and his hair gradually thickened. When he moved out of his house, the last sum of money hit his account. Once all this money was spent, he could stop working, go back to school, and begin his forgetting courses. This was probably the essence of youth, having nothing, yet losing nothing either. After all, this was the twilight of his life. After a long journey of self-redemption, perhaps innocence was the best destination for a person. On the train returning home, the scenery outside was constantly retreating. This was a train journey from the terminal station to the starting point, moving from a big city to a small town, erasing people's dreams along the way. Everyone on the train was heading back to their birthplace, the last hometown in their lives. The melody playing backward in his headphones emitted peculiar tones, but he paid no attention because, at this moment, his heart was filled with uncertainty and fear of the unknown. Even though pursuing the unknown was the theme of his life, it was also the only way home in this world. Like this increasingly new old song, someday, no one would hear it again or hum its tune. All its notes would eventually dissipate from the sheet music, merging into the black and white keys of the piano. A few days ago, he placed his family's final letter into an envelope, dropped it into the mailbox, and packed all his belongings into a small suitcase. Indeed, these were all his possessions. Although he once had many exquisite, expensive, or useless items cluttering up the entire not-so-large room, now they had all been sent back to the store or returned to friends who had become strangers. He arrived at the station in the evening, carrying a train ticket he had salvaged from the trash. Passing through the dense crowd backward, he sat on the train mentioned on the ticket. The beginning of a journey was always filled with weariness, but now he was gradually becoming more spirited, and a few hints of rosiness appeared on his somber face. After several hours, he finally reached his destination, precisely at the departure time printed on the ticket, down to the last minute. Stepping off the train, the sunlight outside was just right, and the morning dew had reformed on his freshly cut hair. Dragging his luggage around the street corner, he entered a barber shop. After giving the barber some money, the scattered hair was gathered onto his head with scissors. At this moment, his reflection in the mirror looked a bit more immature, rebellious, and innocent. However, this would be the hairstyle destined to accompany him for many years, witnessing his return to youthful days. Walking backward through the streets, everything was so familiar, but his steps gradually slowed, and his heart began to weigh heavy. As the dawn faded, the road seemed endless until, finally, with his back to a door, he stopped. Turning around, the door slowly opened, and family members unseen for many years gave him a tight hug, their hearts filled with reluctance. On this day, he tossed and turned in bed, finding it difficult to wake up. At 3 in the morning, his heart tightened. This lingering pain, intensifying bit by bit over the past year, finally reached its peak on this day. The moment had come. It would be the final resolution and the beginning of a long journey of forgetting that. What is love, after all? Even though he couldn't remember anything beyond the age of 19, the hidden memories and the throbbing of youth began to resurface in his body. Growing increasingly uneasy, he became sensitive, conflicted, more anxious, and perplexed as this day approached. Her image gradually appeared in his mind, a girl he had permanently forgotten. Sitting up in bed, he added a phone number to his mobile, pressed the end button, and spoke to her for the first time. It was a melancholic conversation, with intermittent sobs coming from the other end of the receiver. When the crying stopped, he pressed the dial button, and everything returned to calm. Yes, they were together. It was his first love, but also the last romance of his life. They met in the rain, and as rainwater ascended from them and the ground to the dreary sky, he, with an expressionless face, appeared calm, although he should have felt like meeting a long-lost friend. Yet, at this moment, he seemed ready to leave a hurried stranger. They embraced and kissed, reclaiming their tears in the rain, and finally, the sky cleared. The water on them vanished, they held hands, and walked backward through the streets, retracing their past. They fell in love, gained each other's trust, became intuitive and unspoken soulmates. However, cruel time gradually devoured their beautiful memories. Every shared activity led to a shared forgetfulness, and their feelings cooled accordingly. They began to experience distance, becoming strangers and constrained. Still, a bit of passion and novelty returned between them. Their conversations gained shyness and restraint, moments enough to make faces flush and hearts race. Although they were no longer intimate, they started to interact like friends, polite yet not devoid of ambiguity. They forgot each other's flaws and displeasures, even though each day, the other person seemed more unfamiliar and mysterious. However, this naive feeling made their hearts race faster every day. Finally, one day, they sat together, sharing their last cup of coffee, deleting each other's numbers from their phones forever. They chatted happily, exchanging pleasantries. As he got up and sat back in his seat, looking at her from a distance, only the fondness and curiosity for her remained burning in his mind. In the end, he stood up and walked backward out of the coffee shop, and that girl never existed in his memories. In the classroom, the physics teacher was explaining the collapse of the universe, but he, absent-minded, was busy with his own affairs. As the pen scratched on the paper, lines of text disappeared bit by bit. When he placed the last blank sheet back into the drawer, he pensively stared out the window, thinking that perhaps he should write a story for time. However, this idea quickly evaporated with the ticking of the clock.
Sorry.